long before New York sold itself to the world as a city of liberty, ambition, and new beginnings. There was a quieter, darker reality unfolding in plain sight, right where the financial heart of America would eventually beat. Because in the early 1700s, near what we now call Wall Street, enslaved men, women, and children were bought and sold openly, not in hidden alleys or distant plantations, but in the center of the city's daily life, beneath the gaze of merchants, lawmakers, and churchgoers who pretended not to see what was happening. And if you stood there at the time, you would have heard the sounds of carts rolling over cobblestone streets, the calls of traders advertising sugar, fur, and tobacco, and woven into that noise, the quiet terror of human beings treated as property, inspected like livestock, prodded, measured, priced, and traded as casually as barrels of flour. Because New York, despite the myths we like to tell ourselves, was once one of the largest slave-holding cities in the North, with enslaved people making up nearly a fifth of its population at certain points, and their labor powered everything from construction to shipping to domestic life. Yet the city worked very hard to hide this truth from history, especially as the idea of America as a land of freedom began to take shape. And the hidden slave market near Wall Street became one of the most uncomfortable reminders of that contradiction. A place officially known as the meal market, where enslaved Africans were rented out, sold, or auctioned under municipal authority, meaning this wasn't some rogue operation run by criminals. It was regulated, taxed, and normalized by the city itself. And what makes this even more unsettling is how routine it was, because these sales happened during regular market hours, while citizens went about their day, buying food, discussing politics, or attending church, often just steps away. And for the enslaved, this meant living with constant uncertainty, because at any moment, a family could be torn apart by a single transaction. A husband sold to one household, a wife rented to another, a child taken away entirely, with no legal protection, no voice, and no way to resist. And the psychological toll of that kind of existence was immense, because slavery in an urban environment like New York was different from plantation slavery in the South, but not gentler, as enslaved people here lived in closer proximity to their owners, under constant surveillance, yet surrounded by a city that advertised opportunity and freedom, creating a cruel mental tension where hope was visible but unreachable. And this tension occasionally exploded into resistance, like the slave revolts of 1712 and 1741, moments when fear gripped the white population, and the response was swift and brutal, with executions, public burnings, and mass imprisonments, all carried out near the same streets where commerce continued as usual, reinforcing the message that black lives were expendable if it meant preserving economic stability. And this is where Wall Street's deeper symbolism begins to emerge, because the street itself was named after a literal wall built by enslaved labor to protect the city. And over time, that wall became less physical and more psychological, separating those who benefited from the system from those crushed by it. And even as New York slowly began to move toward abolition, it did so reluctantly, passing gradual emancipation laws that allowed slaveholders to keep enslaved people for decades longer, ensuring that freedom, when it finally came, arrived late and incomplete, leaving formerly enslaved people with little property, few rights, and a city that preferred to forget their suffering rather than confront it. And that forgetting was intentional, because as Wall Street transformed into a global symbol of wealth and power, the story of the slave market didn't fit the image New York wanted to project. So it faded from textbooks, landmarks, and public memory, surviving only in scattered records, court documents, and the oral histories of black communities who refused to let it disappear. And when you understand this history, the atmosphere of the place changes, because the sidewalks around Wall Street stop feeling neutral and instead feel layered, heavy with unresolved memory, as if the city itself is standing on top of a buried truth, one that still echoes today in economic inequality, racial wealth gaps, and the uncomfortable fact that some of America's earliest financial prosperity was built, in part, on human bondage. And the most unsettling part is that none of this was hidden at the time. It was only hidden later, erased carefully as generations passed, until freedom became the dominant narrative and slavery was pushed somewhere else, somewhere southern, somewhere distant. But the reality is that New York's hidden slave market wasn't hidden at all. It was right there, in the open, near Wall Street, reminding us that history doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just waits quietly beneath our feet, asking whether we're brave enough to acknowledge it.